Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. My name is Mike Canning and I'm with Duke Corporate Education. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome you today to our webinar, The Project Revolution. This is the first installment of the Adaptive Leadership Series, which was co-developed and being delivered by Strategy Execution and Duke Corporate Education. The series is designed to bring cutting-edge thought leadership and practical insights to leaders who today have to navigate a much more complex and volatile world. Before we get started, I wanted to run through a couple of logistical items to help us with today's presentation. First of all attendees have been placed in listen-only mode. Even though we look forward to your participation and capturing questions, we certainly want to encourage you to participate using the questions feature located on the control panel. We'll address your questions during the Q&A towards the end of the session, but please don't wait to submit your questions to the end. Please submit your questions and comments at any point throughout the session. It really helps us to see what's on your mind as we're going. We'll monitor what's coming in and we'll do our best to address as many of the questions as we can. This webinar is also being recorded and we will make the link to the recording available to you so that you can share these insights with other colleagues and friends, or simply review the material at a later date for yourself. And for those of you who enjoy Twitter and like doing more than one thing at once, please join the conversation on Twitter by following the hashtag L lead, W with ASEP. So lead with ASEP on Twitter. Thanks. Antonio, can I ask you to advance to slide 1? There he is. Antonio, thanks so much. And there's a picture of you, I'm not sure what, leading an orchestra there or what, but it's fantastic. And it is our privilege to have Antonio Nieto-Rodriguez with us today. Antonio is a renowned Thinkers 50 expert, lecturer, author, and is considered one of the most prominent and influential thinkers in this area of project management and leadership. He's also someone that I've had the privilege to, an opportunity to work with and learn from. So Antonio, please say hello.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for the kind introduction. And hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here in the first webinar of the year. It's an honor to be actually the first one and a challenge as well. And thanks to everybody to join and taking 1 hour of your time to listen to Mike and myself. We'll make it worth, I'm sure about that. So Mike, thank you for the introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Antonio. Great. And again, thanks for joining. And Antonio, can I ask you? Yeah, that's great. Look, this conversation is going to unfold in 4 parts, pretty much following this flow. And we'll start right here with the notion of the project revolution. So Antonio, I know you've been working with companies around the world for many years, particularly in this area of project management and the changing nature of work. And if you could just do a few minutes on what do you mean by a project revolution and what's behind it, I think it'd be a great place to start the conversation.
Sure, Mike. I wanted to start the discussion or the presentation on some facts. I use as much as I can facts and examples, real examples to project some messages and trends. And what I wanted to share with the audience is 2 big trends, which I think some of you might be aware, some of you not, but what is sure is going to impact everybody in this call, everybody where you work, and will have consequences which I think are going to be very beneficial for us. And so the first trend I wanted to talk about is, if you see on the screen, this is a graph which I made from Google. It's called Ngram. Google digitalized all the books they could find over the past 200 years. You can go to Ngram, you can put some keywords, and then Google will tell you how many times that word appeared that year in publications, business publications, books, media. So I took 8 words that we hear a lot at work. I'm sure everybody in the call hears about most of these words many times during the day: agile, strategy, marketing, finance, IT, sales, project management. So I wanted to know what's the key word which is most highly used in business and leadership. And I'll let you guys think for a second. From the 8 words that you see there, which one is your first call? Which one would you say this is my choice? Well, it's actually strategy. If you can see that there, strategy is the #1 word. So it's not a surprise, actually, Mike. If you see the graph of strategy, strategy comes from the word, Second World War, and then the business schools started to use it. It became like a fuss and a big thing. Everybody needs to know about strategy. So that's what you see there. The second big word is sell. So to be in business, you need to sell. So one of the first business manual was around sell, how to sell products. If you go further down the line, the #3, very frequent word, marketing. So branding, marketing, also not very famous 50 years ago, but now is on the top 3. Finance, you need to manage the accounting and the cost. So there's quite a lot of publications and use of finance, innovation. And then in the end, you see information technology, IT, which started in the 80s, so that makes sense. Project management, which we thought it's so important, and we actually think is so important, actually is not, if you look at the big picture. So for me, and Agile, which we hear a lot and will continue hearing a lot, compared to the other big topics, we're very small. So this was a huge finding for me. It explained a gap that I had not seen before, but which explains also the rationale, which is people don't care about projects that much or more than strategy. So that's the first finding, the first key data. But there's one thing which I wanted to share too, is there's one word which has been used more than strategy in sales and operation. And I let you think for a second. There's one word which in work, at business, you'll hear that every day many times. And that word is project. So people do talk about projects a lot. They took projects every day, starting projects, delays in projects. Let's launch a new project. But actually, when you look at project management, there's a huge gap. So I think this is something that explains why people are a bit pulled down with project management, not so much in projects. And you see the trend is just going up. Every time there's change and disruption, there will be more projects. The second fact that I want to share, and we'll be coming back to these trends later on, Mike, is if you zoom into an organization, and you could split the work in 2 dimensions, big dimensions. One is about running the business, operating the company. It's all about efficiency, speed, volume. The other one is about changing the business. So anticipating the future, creating new future. I did a lot of research on that space too, trying to see how did the companies look like 100 years ago. And what you see is that 100 years ago, actually, they didn't have many projects. It was all about making things more efficient and making sure you produce the goods that you wanted to sell. So there were not too many projects. At the same time, as we evolved, most of the management thinking and improvement theories were focused on that like blue, in how can we run the business better and automate it and make it even better. So what you see is a very slow trend, a very slow shift or dripping from people working on the day-to-day activities, operations, towards project work. So what you see 2 things clearly is, if you look at your company, almost for sure you'll have more projects today than 5 years ago and then 10 years ago. So the amount of projects is increasing. Second, you'll find more and more people working projects part-time because they still have their job in the light blue area, they're functional jobs, but they're involved part-time in 2 projects, in 3 projects. So the amount of resources doing project work is increasing. And the last point here, Mike, is that this trend was almost unnoticed so far for the past 80 years. But when you look at the new things that are coming up, and this is something I discussed with experts in Denmark, in Odense, about robotics, is What's going to happen when robots and artificial intelligence are mainstream in businesses is that shift is going to be accelerated, meaning that people working today in a fixed functional job will need to change radically. See, this has two impacts. Project leaders, project managers will step up. They play a different role. Second, normal people who are not project managers will need to learn about project management. So that's the big trends that I wanted to start. The number of projects is exploding everywhere, privately, also at work, but there's also that shift within organizations in the type of work. And last, when we talk about trends, is that this change is impacting not just organizations, but I recently worked on a paper on the role of corporate governance and board of directors. This important governance body in every organization was not paying attention to projects. They were not interested in implementation that much. It was more about risk management. But today, the leading boards, they actually care. They prioritize on where to invest, which projects do we found, and how can we accelerate and support that. One of the big ones, of course, is digital and digitalization. So this is a project which is watched by many boards. So, and finally, I think, Mike, you know better than me on this, but education is becoming much more project-based. It's been proven that we learn by practicing, having some deadlines, working with partners and stakeholders, diversity, and having an outlook and coming with some decisions. So starting from kids, you see more and more education project-based. And last, government, the same. Governments are doing more projects to increase development and around the world. So that was the first part, Mike, just setting a bit the scene, looking the big picture, the macro, and this big trend, which I call the project revolution.
Hey, Antonio, it's really, really interesting stuff. You've put a lot in one place for us to think about here, but just thinking like even as Duke organizes its MBA classes now, there's so much more of the work that's done in projects, because as you're saying, you know, people really need to understand not just how to gain new knowledge, but how to work together, collaborate, make things happen, experiment, and do those sorts of things. So the learning and doing connection, even in education, is getting tighter and tighter. And I guess, Antonio, it's probably true that, you know, given the competitive advantage is becoming more transient, the rate of change in the marketplace continues to accelerate, and speed counts. I would imagine that the trends you're speaking about are only going to accelerate more exponentially than linearly.
Well, that's a great point, Mike. Absolutely, yes. When I talk to, sometimes I go to California and meet some people there, and I say, guys, when are we going to go slower? They tell me all these new inventions, the pipeline. I say, can we go a bit slower, because it's just, we cannot keep the pace. And they tell me, Antonio, today is the slowest day in the rest of your life. So basically what you're saying, Mike, things are just going to accelerate in a way we've never seen before.
Yeah, and so it makes sense, I guess, Antonio, in a lot of ways, that not only are things going to go faster and will be more about changing a company, but its projects are the sort of the thin edge of the wedge that are being used to actually redesign companies, products, you know, and all sorts of services. So very, very interesting. Thanks. Hey, Antonio, if we could sort of move to the next thing, I guess, you know, you and I have talked about this a number of times. I'm always fascinated. So if that is the trend we're all going to have to be working with and leading, and we'll probably all be managing projects, even if project management isn't in our title, what does it really mean to us in terms of rethinking project management as a discipline?
Yeah, has been in my mind for years as well. Back to that first gap where I talk about projects, and then at the bottom you see project management. It's a 50 years old profession, so it's young but also old. And why is not picking up? And I think one of the troubles with project management as we know today is very complex. If you know, Mike, the origins of project management, the frameworks that we use, like the PMBOK, were developed mostly by engineers so that the engineers could use it. So it's a very technical, very, very good, very deep, but very technical. So I think we need to find a way, and that's what I'm trying. I know you guys are trying that, to simplify project and project management so that anybody can use it. That's one of my aspirations, make sure anybody can use project techniques to do their projects better.
Yeah, great, Antonio. Maybe just go into a little bit more about how you see some of the disciplines and orthodoxies and skills changing.
Yeah, sure, Mike. And just before that, this is a very simple graph I made, which explains the complexity. Not only that project management is complex, but it has become even more complex over the years. So this is the versions of the PMBOK. And you see the 6th version, which was released 2 years ago. It has, from 64 pages, has gone to 756. So all very valid points, but this is for the professional project managers. But there's millions of people who are not. So what I think, and we'll just share a couple of ideas, is first, you've seen this we call the project life cycle. What we learn to manage, what we learn to define, and how to execute it. So what I think is that first, the idea of benefits, we've talked about benefit management for years, but now it's becoming primarily. We need to just really put a lot of focus on benefits, which in the past we were not. But not only put the focus on benefits, but capturing them better and sooner after the project has started the first month, trying to find some benefits so that the project gets acceptance and buy-in and resources before it's staggering and losing the attention of top management and the people. So benefits have to be pushed forward. And I'll give you an example a bit later about that. The second big change, I think, is we've been focused on that wide part, the project life cycle, and kind of ignore saying, oh, ideation is not part of project management. We don't care. And then integration and transition to operations, we don't care either. We just focus on that piece. And I think the future project management is going to be broader. I think where actually you can make a difference is in the ideation, is where you spend time before setting up a project to define and to find more clearly what you want. An example here, Mike, which I research a lot, and it's a paper we will be sharing later on, is the Project Purple. Project Purple is the nickname or the secret name of the first iPhone. The first iPhone, the project started in 2004. That's when they actually set up a fully dedicated project team with the best resources in Apple. The idea took 3 years. The first idea of the iPhone was 2001, but they were not ready. It was not the right time. So it took 2 to 3 years for Apple and Steve Jobs to decide to set up a project and start with the process. But that 3 years made a difference. The second big area where I think things will change is the transition or moving the project forward. 2 things here, Mike. First, I think one of the pitfalls of this methodology is they aim for 100% termination or very close to 100% in order to be able to transfer to operations. When is a project 100% perfect or finished? Never. You know that, we know that. So why are you pushing a project which people start dropping off? There's no interest, there's no sponsor anymore. So I believe that if we aim for an 80%, 85% completion, most projects or much more projects will be finished. We will be able to free up resources, we'll integrate people from operations more into the project activities and the fine tuning. So I think that part will and has to change. The other point on that respect, I think in order for project managers to evolve, at some point they need to run the operations too. So I think that's something that I believe is going to be another area for development. Okay, and the third point, we all know this, so I don't need to explain the triple constraint. I think the triple constraint is great, but this is very inward focus. It doesn't talk about benefits. It doesn't talk about impact. It doesn't talk about the soft skills or soft areas of a project. So we have a great tool to manage the internal kitchen. You cannot expect to manage that and drive the organization forward. Yeah, time is important, cost to scope, yes, but that doesn't sell. So I think there will be 2 other, at least that's my proposal, constraint. One is more about getting the engagement. We know how difficult it is to engage people, especially when you're working across the company, across business units, across the world, and people have a day job and many other projects in parallel. So the engagement is knowing the purpose of that project, the passion that will drive those people to commit their time and knowledge to do that project, and dedication. How much are people dedicated? If nobody puts time on it, it will never work. So there's one part there. The other one is on the benefits and results. I think we do pay a bit of attention. When I talk about a project today to my senior stakeholders, I almost only talk about that triangle you see: the benefits, the impact, the big risk, and what are we going to contribute. I will not talk about the triple constraint. They should not know. So I think that's the second area that things will evolve, hopefully, in this direction. I'm sure people that are listening are familiar with this. It's just the way to present it. And the last part, Mike, I've been a big fan of simplification of complex things, and I realized that for strategy, you have the 5 forces of Michael Porter, and that allowed people who had nothing to know or knew anything about strategy to use a framework and do strategic thinking. You have the 7 P's of Porter for marketing, and we all use them to try to come up with a marketing plan, even if we didn't know anything. So I do believe that for projects, we don't have that. So part of that simplification is what I'm proposing here. I call a project canvas, in the like of the business model canvas from Alex Osterveld. So it's just in one page. You should be able to know whether the project is well funded, has options for succeeding or not, or you still need to work it out. And it's focused on questions: why, the who, then the whole kind of project management, which is the what, the how, and the when. And then where are you executing that project is very important. We know that priorities and culture do impact a lot the projects. These are internal. So in one page, the goal is that anybody can use it. You can be a student, you can be non-for-profit, but with one slide, you will know your project or not. And just wanted to finish this section with an example of a project which I love and I research a lot. Mike, this is a beautiful church cathedral which is being constructed in Barcelona. It's called Sagrada Familia. And you know, when this project started in 1882. 1882. So what, 140, 130 years ago? They've been delayed for years, more than 100 years delay. So you want delay, there's a delay here, 100 years delay. They're aiming to finish the 2024, so 100 years after the founder, the architect who wanted to build this amazing cathedral was unfortunately killed by a Trump. So, but what I think is interesting, what I've opened my eyes here is, first, I was talking to them to find out, hey, you're not ashamed being 100 years late with your project. It's not 1 week, it's not 1 year, it's 100 years. And the person in charge said me, listen, Antonio, you know what? You know who's our client? Our client is God, and God is not in a hurry. And I found that, okay, makes sense. Yes, yeah, true. It's not in a hurry. You might be in a hurry, but God not. So the time pressure is important, but depends who's the client. But the other big point I want to highlight here for the listeners is project late, 100 years late, they're making benefits. They've been making benefits for 100 years. They make millions per day on visitors, on sponsorship, on documentaries. So a project which is 100 years late, but they're making millions yearly, it's showing that you don't need to be finished to start thinking about benefits, start capturing benefits, and fund like that your project going forward. So it's really an eye-opener as an example.
Hey, Antonio, really, really good stuff. Hey, a couple of things to just to track along with you. So I'm imagining most of us have some less patient clients than the one you were just describing. And I really like the canvas, this notion of sort of we move from Porter to Rodriguez in strategy here. Thinking, but I mean it. I am a big fan, and I know most of us are, about putting things on one page. You know, it's
Mhm.
part of the skill of being a leader is to take very complex things and help people to understand them in simple terms. So that idea of the things you just had on the project canvas would be a really good tool that not only allows you to do the normal things you have to do and manage scope, time, and cost, because as you're saying, they don't go away, but we have some new things like on the human side of projects have become really important, right? I mean, to,
Exactly.
to do really more strategic work in a world that's more uncertain, it just requires people to be thoughtful, skillful, collaborate better, and to tap into their passions and purpose and get a high level of engagement. Because in many cases, it's their great thinking and their skills that are going to make all the difference, not just sort of the tools of the trade of project management, right?
Exactly. You perfect. Very well defined, Mike. Yes.
Great. Hey, so let's move one more step, Antonio. So if we thought now of not only just sort of the discipline of project management and what's happening in the world of work, but let's even, make this one step closer to us. So for all of us who are managing projects, whether we have that in our title or not, what do you see as some of the new, really critical skills in this new project landscape if you're going to lead a project or work successfully as a team member?
Yeah. So I think that's the part where we should self reflect. I do that as well on how can I become better. And there's two parts here. I think there's the full-time project managers, who I think the next slide is going to be addressed. And then you have the people who are just occasional project managers, who are starting to be dragged into that trend where 50, 60% of their time will be dedicated to project work very, very soon. So let me start with what I think are the ways to develop people in the project space. And for many of you, probably this is not new. We know the PMI Triangle has been there for a few years, but I just want to make the point on what does it mean for someone who's already a project manager or project leader and wants to grow in their career path. So what we've thought about project management so far is that to be a good project manager, you just need to do that technical project management, the light blue that you see on the left dimension. So that we thought that was enough. Get your PMP, understand project, learn how to define a project charter, make a plan, Gantt charts, and so on. And that was, I think, valid for some years. But once you go into the world of today, where change is happening every day and priorities change and we need to go faster, we've realized that that blue part is not enough. You cannot be a good project leader if you just focus on that blue. It's a must-have basis and foundation, but it will not make you a great project leader. I think the areas that you need to develop further is on the purple at the bottom is understanding management, understanding strategy, understanding the customers, the key customers, your competition, understanding the vision and the goals that management has set. So you need to go beyond. We talk about silos. There's a silo around project and project management. We need to break that and see how we can understand and collaborate with the priorities of the business. So for that to develop is about learning. MBAs is a great way to get those skills, but you have also masters but open your eyes and learn new disciplines in business and leadership. And then the third dimension, Mike, this is not new for you and Duke, and strategy execution is about leadership. Is not about management anymore. I think there's a part of management, of course, and when you're executing, but then you need to especially management goes for the triple constraint, the one we knew. But I think for engaging people, when you start talking about engaging your sponsor, the executive teams, engaging partners, engaging people to work for you when they don't report you, the leadership skills are fundamental. So I would not hire anybody to work in my PMO if they don't have a certification which can prove. It can be a master, it can be a university. They've learned the basics, they know the basics, but they need to have a good understanding of the company, the vision, where we're going, the challenges, and have managed teams, virtual teams, transversal teams, be able to engage people in that sense. So I think that's what I see today as the future of project leaders and where people should grow to become better.
Mm-hmm.
If you want, Mike, I'll share another eye-opening for me
Yeah, sure,
example.
Antonio. Come on, let's do it.
So what I was always thinking in a very kind of close way of projects. You do projects and then you finish and you start projects and so on. So a very good friend of mine in Spain, he worked for Microsoft. He started his career in Microsoft selling Office, more as a salesman, selling Office products and all the software connected to that. At one point, Microsoft decided to go into the ERP world. They didn't have an ERP like SAP would have. So they bought a company in Scandinavia called Navision. So they asked my friend called Cesar, Cesar, do you want to lead that integration? It's a big one because it's European. So do you want to do that? Do you want to do that 3-year project? And my friend said, yes, I want to. I'm really happy. I learned PMP, I get certified, and then he dedicated 3 years. You know how integrations are, very demanding. He dedicated 3 years to split the business and to integrate it into Microsoft. It was very tough, but they met their goals. They met the synergies, they met the timing. So an extraordinary performance by my friend Cesar, 3 years. And I asked him, and then what did you do next, Cesar? Which project did you take afterwards, after such a big successful project? Which other project did you take? And he tells me, listen, Antonio, I didn't take any other project. And I say, what? With that track record, you could have done the most strategic project in the company. And he said, no. I said to my boss, I want to run this business I've created. I've spent 3 years running this project. There's nobody else in this company who knows better that new business. And I want to take the challenge of running that new business, the P&L, growing it, and making a success of it. And Cesar now is vice president of Microsoft in South America, one of the top 3 guys in that company. And that was an eye-opener, Mike. I think we are, again, very often narrow, or the way we look at projects, it's very narrow, and we finish a project and then we're looking for the next one and so on. But this guy taught me a lesson. Why don't you run what you just built? Why don't you try to sell the software that you just put in place? Why don't you take the new department that you just reorganized? That will give you skills and challenges that you've never seen before. You can, and you should always go back if you like projects and change. But this learning for me was crucial. You need to explore outside projects to become a better project manager.
It's really, really interesting, Antonio. I mean, even the notion of, if you just think about what you laid out in the beginning, right? The whole world of work is changing. Some is going to be quickly automated. I read something the other day. It was an Oxford study where they said 50% of daily work, routine tasks, and not just, manufacturing things, but things we think of as knowledge work as well, could be automated today with the technologies that exist today, never mind the future. And then you've got, I was listening to some Bloomberg the other day talking about the recent Davos convention, and they had government leaders and business people there talking about AI and machine learning. So if we're going to be moving in a world where, projects really are the way work is done, and it sort of comes to the foreground more and more, it kind of makes sense that people who are great project leaders may end up being the best source of people that are great business leaders.
Yes.
It used to be seen as more of a specific discipline that you could manage a project. But I think as the world of work becomes more project oriented, people that are great at that may actually have a better trajectory into the top jobs. So it's kind of interesting.
And I love that reflection, Mike. It was not part of the presentation as such, but I've written a few articles about these CEOs, the PR project managers, the future CEOs, precisely from what you're saying. These people have the experience of dealing with multiple stakeholders, with different type of employees. So yes, I think there will be lots of openings for people who can lead change and big transformation programs. Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes sense. And, I love the triangle. It just calls out, as you do with so many things, just pulls a number of things together. So, in the work that we've been doing with strategy execution and all of our clients around the world, it's pretty clear that people still need very strong technical project management skills. So we're not saying we suddenly need generalists, but it's sort of, to really thrive today in this world of projects and to distinguish yourself, what's going to really make a difference is the contextual knowledge of really understanding strategy, business, finance, et cetera. But then also this notion of, as projects, as you laid out in the beginning, projects are now the vehicle to change companies and to win in the market and to drive new strategy. You talked about more and more projects being the vehicle to drive change. And so what we're finding is, the more strategically important the project, it typically has more important stakeholders, it crosses more boundaries, and things of that nature, and you have more diversity and larger teams, and those things are all things that are that managing that complexity, influencing across those boundaries, building a high performance team are all the things that are really the act of leaders or leadership. And so it's how do you put these three things together, enough contextual knowledge about the business and the industry you're in to really understand the where your project's headed, the technical skills to be able to make sure you're doing all the right things at the right time, but then this notion of the human side of things and engaging people and working across boundaries has become more and more important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, great.
Two more slides.
What else you have here? Any? Oh, okay, good. Let's do this, Antonio.
Just quickly, two more slides, just highlighting. I think
Yep.
what we just said, the focus has been on running the business. I think not just for the employees, but for management too, for the leaders. This is what we know, this is what we can measure, this is where we have process and systems in place. An executive who will not spend much time in a project. It's something unforeseen, it's risky, we don't know the benefits and so on. But I think with the trend, my prediction is by 2025, this is going to be radical. And there's so much to be done in that space. You just mentioned the education, I think, and you don't change organization just by training. There's a lot of more things to be taken care, and process is systems in a culture and KPIs and performance. And so I think we will see a lot of work in this space in the next 5-10 years for sure.
Great. Hey, Antonio, any closing thoughts or things you're seeing out there with companies that they're doing that is sort of indicative of what we'll see more of?
Yeah, and I wanted to finish also a bit sharing eye-opening ideas. I think we hear a lot of ideas, usually very close, but I wanted to take the opportunity of this webinar to share the most radical ideas. So yes, companies are doing things to change and to adapt, to be more agile, and to do more project-based work. I've been working with several companies. They want to train all their executives in project management, for example. They establish a PMO, they start prioritizing, they create project review meetings. So I think that's all very, very positive. And like we were saying, the training is or the education and development is an essential skill. One thing is key is, if you want to do better in your projects, you should never just train the project managers or the managers. The executives have to be trained too. So this is a golden rule that it's key to make it happen. Another very interesting idea, and then I move with the example, which for me it's amazing. But another thing I heard, and I've not seen it published, but I recently heard that IBM was considering replacing their job descriptions, job descriptions. We all have job description. Who doesn't have? This is 30, 40 years we've been working on job description. They've realized that actually people don't work in their job descriptions most of the time. And what they realize is that they're working in projects. So they're thinking of canceling, removing job descriptions and just having project roles. You're in that project, you play that role for the next 6 months. So I think that was another idea which I think it makes a lot of sense. I've heard about that before, not in the massive scale of an IBM, but just to close up here, Mike, yep, on what companies are doing, and this is for me the most radical change I've seen. I was talking to somebody in Philips, you know, this 125-year-old company. Mm-hmm. Philips has been there for so many years, but they've not grown like the other big companies, and there has been always challenge about the share and the progress in the market, stock market. So they decided to split the company in 3 independent companies. The Lights, which was the foundation of Philips in Eindhoven, mm-hmm, was spin off. The Consumer, all the toothbrushes and so on, also separate. And then one of the big focus was in healthcare, so hospitals and so on. They're one of the biggest producer of high tech in the area of hospitals, like scanners and so on. So I was talking to somebody. You see already there some of the products, high-level executive there, and he told me, listen, Antonio, we've transformed. It was an excellent program. We split in 3, but we don't grow as we wanted to grow. We still is very slow growth, and we've done all what we had to do. So what we're thinking to do next is, as from next year, we're going to stop selling products. And I say, come on, Thomas, don't tell me that. You've been selling products for 125 years. What are you going to sell? And they said, listen, Antonio, we're not going to sell products because we realize that we can sell a scanner, like you see in the screen, 5 per year. That's not enough. That will not generate the growth we thought about. So as from next year, we're going to sell projects. And I said, come on, from products to projects? And I said, yes, because we realize that if, for example, a local government is thinking about establishing a hospital, we were going to do that. We're going to sell a project to build a hospital. We're going to do the studies. We're going to get the partners together. We're going to build the hospital. We're going to run the hospital. We put our products in there, but we put many other products. So we will be engaged with the different clients for 25 years, not 5 products per year, 25 years. So I said, wow. So if every company who's selling products today looks at the selling in a very different way, take another example, and with this I'll finish. Take that concept to a product-based company like Nike. What do we do today? We go to Nike, yep, we think we want to start running, we buy the best sneakers to help us start running, and then we go back to Nike maybe 3 years after, so to buy new sneakers, fashion, and so on. What if Nike would do the same? You would go to a shop in Nike, and basically you'll see projects. Nike will sell you projects. You want to run the marathon in New York, buy this 3-year project, or you wanted a 5-year project. We'll do everything for you. We'll make sure that you make it happen. We provide you of course, the sneakers and the shoes, but we'll provide a trainer, a monitor to watch, that diet, and we'll check. We'll make your project happen. And if it's not the marathon in running, maybe you want to do that climbing, or you want to do that sport. We make sure you play that sport. So I think this is, again, revolutionary. If every company that sells products starts selling you projects, this impacts everything. This opens new doors for project managers, for the way companies get organized, for many, many, many changes. So with that, I think just wanted to share that last very provocative thought.
Hey, it's really interesting, Antonio. I was just sitting here thinking while you were going through that, I'm just thinking of all the clients that we also work with around the world. And one of the trends I see is people doing two things, right? One is not just being customer centric in terms of, how do we serve our clients, but almost being customer enrichment, thinking about what could we do next for our customers, coupled with this notion that companies are trying to figure out how to move from selling products and services to solutions and experiences, right? And
Right.
so your first one is kind of, how do I go from selling scanners to thinking about more broadly patient outcomes and building the hospital in which the scanners are there, and the Nike example about, another kind of experience. I think this is kind of an indomitable trend that's not going to stop. And I hadn't made the connection until right now, but, thinking about that will require moving to solutions and experiences will require projects. That's the way this is going to happen, and just re-architecting the business that we're in and how we do it is pretty amazing stuff. Hey, I want to cover one thing here, Antonio, and then I really want to get to some questions because we've got some questions piling in. Is that okay with you?
Sure, go ahead, Mike. We still have, what, 12 minutes? So perfect.
Yeah. I'm going to go really fast. So look, the work we've been doing between Duke Corporate Education and Strategy Execution in building out this adaptive strategic execution program. The program is designed to address many of the issues that you've mentioned and to help leaders of projects thrive in this, fast changing landscape by understanding how to manage complexity, influence across boundaries without authority, aligning work with strategy, and even things like design thinking now that we're thinking about projects as solutions. So with the world of work evolving as you've described, I think it's safe to say we'll all be managing and working on more projects, whether it's in our title or not. And it's these sorts of skills that will sort of enable and distinguish the leaders of the future. So just wanted to lay that out there, and for folks to be able to get more information about that, we'll send you some things around how to connect and how to get in contact with the Strategy X. Hey, a couple of questions have come through, Antonio, so may I pose a few to you? One is, Vivian posed a question, it's an interesting one. She said, when I think about your project Canvas, isn't that really in some ways, sort of similar to what's in a project charter? And how do you see those two things as different?
Very good question, Vivian. Yes, absolutely. Yes, this is what you would see in a project charter. Not completely 100%, but yes, the idea is there. And what I'm trying to do with the Canvas is that it's just simple. It's a way to think about the project before even started to do in the charter. Does this project make sense? Can I deliver it? It's something missing. So, and then the next step, once the project is official and you get the go ahead, then you will not skip the charter. You actually need to do the project charter, because that's where you would define the scope and the scope in and out and all these details. So it's an umbrella of a project management methodology. Good question. Thank you, Vivian.
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's sort of like, if I hear you correctly, Antonio, it's kind of like, pilots have to do a lot of things to fly a plane, but they always have a checklist, right?
Exactly.
Sort of like if you used your Canvas as the checklist, even as you're building your charter, at least it gives you a more holistic view of all the things you should consider.
Exactly. And you don't need to be an expert to use it.
Great, fantastic. Hey, a question came in from Ben, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's one of these questions about how do I manage up and across a bit, Antonio. So it's, as a project manager or program managers, we're often senior people get involved on the front end, on the launch, and then they check in once in a while, periodically, usually in a way that feels like they're grilling you more than helping you. And then they go away again. So, do you think that that will change over time? As projects become the mechanism to change the business and become more strategically important? And what do you do as a project manager to try to make sure you're gaining the right attention and support from your senior folks?
Thank you, Ben. Very relevant question as well. Here, absolutely, there will be more attention from senior managers for sure. The problem today is that reporting on projects is hard, and getting good data is hard, and the focus on that data is again back on the triple constraint. Executives do care, of course, if you need more budget and you're a bit late, but that's not what attracts management. Attracts management is, listen, we're getting a bit more efficient, and we're saving so much, and there's a potential. So I think a big way I learn myself, this is actually self-learning, is I don't talk so much about the project anymore. I talk about the benefits to these executives, and that's what makes them attractive. It's the tough questions, but always about benefits, impact, and risk of not achieving something, or the competition being there first. And I think we're not educated. Back to that methodology that we know, it tells you to talk about the deliverable, but not the benefits. I don't know how many times I've talked to project managers where I ask them, what's your project about? And they say, we're building a new CRM system. That's
Right.
not a project. The project is we're going to increase market share with this new system. We're going to simplify our systems, reducing from 10 to 1. And saving so much. And so you cannot imagine how hard it is to move from the pure deliveries where we've been trained to moving layers up to talk about benefits. That not only gets the attention of the senior leaders, but also transversally too. So there's quite some work which I recommend to do to everybody listening. What are the outcomes? What's the benefit of your project? Quantify it if you can. And try that with your bosses next time you talk to them. Not so much about the triple constraint, about that, and you'll get different traction.
It's fantastic. Really, really good. So sort of keep the senior folks focused on the things that they really care about, which are more about the outcomes and benefits of the project, not only the details of the activities, right?
Exactly.
Good. Hey, question from Katerina. First of all, she's enjoying the webinar with you, Antonio, just to let you know. And she says, in terms of projects that are not 100% closed, I think it's your notion of, how do you get 80% and hand off to another team? And, even the ones, that we know will be ongoing, how can we measure the success of those and really understand the benefits? How do you do that so you know that you're getting some of the benefits and you're measuring some of those even before we might not be completely done?
Katerina, very, very good question. And I don't have a clear answer yet. So I will not lie or make it up. I think that keeps in my mind. I think if we're moving to a project life cycle or a view of projects a bit more blurry and more integrated end to end, the traditional KPIs of success will not work. So great, Katrina, that you spotted. I think it's going to be different, and I don't have an answer yet. I know the focus will be on the benefits, for sure. How much are we already delivering? But probably not so much on the scope or the time, because that would be accelerated. So brilliant question, but I don't have yet at least my own views on that. It will change for sure.
Yeah, great, Antonio, thanks. Hey, another question from Courtney asked, is there we've talked a lot about skills. Are there one or two skills you think are going to be the most critical for project leaders and people, handling project work? What are the two or three that really stand out for you, Antonio? I know we've talked about several.
It's it's a great question, because it makes me think right now on the spot, what are the most critical? I would think strategic thinking is super important. It's being able to challenge senior leaders. You might not be the expert in finance or private banking, but you can challenge saying this project doesn't make sense now. So the strategic thinking, when you're able to have that discussion, people will appreciate a lot of you, and employees too, that the team members will help you. So I would say strategic thinking is fundamental. And then perseverance, I think resilience, I would say the second. We know this type of work is not easy. There's up and downs, there's challenges every day. If you give up, then everybody will give up. So I think you need to be a bit foolish in believing of the success, not crazy foolish, but being able to stand up every morning and saying, yes, we can. So I think resilience and strategic thinking.
Yeah, it's great, Antonio. And there's this, it's comes up in all the leadership, research and all. We see it a lot too. People that can bring energy to things, as you're saying, right? So in a world where you have to manage more complexity, more stakeholders, more things that are going on, and it's easy for people to sort of get overwhelmed. So for people to bring good energy and be able to simplify things and manage, build a team and do those sorts of things are really important these days, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Hey, and I've got one more here from Elvira. Talks a little bit about, you talked about the ideation on the front end becoming more important, and really describing and being clear about the benefits on the back end. For some teams that come together and then dismantled, is that part of what the people who manage the portfolio need to do, even beyond the team's sort of life cycle, or is it for the team to do as well?
I would say there's no rule, Elvira. The good question. I think it's every company manages in a bit different way. You'll have ideation workshops, you have ideas, mailbox, and so on. And I think the ideation, what is important is the role of senior management. And the culture of the companies is no, we found this idea. If you just an anecdote, but if you think about which words people love to use, is kickoff. So every day there's kickoffs. We love to have an idea, and tomorrow we have a kickoff. We don't have closing meetings, but we love to kick off. So managing that process where you have lots of ideas and you are cautious and when to start them, when is the right time to start them, so that you first finish what you're doing. And so those cultures are the best, the people who will contribute as diverse as possible. I think the best ideas come often from the ends, from the people who are in contact with the customers. So very open, but education of the top in when to start projects, when is the right time, or just provide a 5% budget to play around and do a mini project, mini idea, mini experiment. That will help a lot.
Antonio, as always with you, it's a pleasure spending time. And as I said at the outset, I continue to appreciate the time I have with you, and I always learn. So I think we are out of time. So thanks to you, Antonio. Thanks to the strategy execution team, and thanks to all of you who joined us today. I strongly encourage you to learn more about the Adaptive Strategic Execution Program by visiting strategyx.com, ASEP. Lots of good information, people there to help you, and we've got lots of folks who've been through the program and have given it very, very high marks and good stories about how it's helped their own careers. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I hope you all have a pleasant morning or afternoon wherever you are, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure. Looking forward connecting with everyone.
Thanks a lot, Antonio.
Take care.
I think we're closed.
Bye-bye.